You're listening to The Voluntary Life, where you can hear ideas for finding freedom in an unfree world. Visit thevoluntarylife.com to connect with the show and hear all past episodes. Here's your host, Jake.
Hi, it's Jake here. Welcome to The Voluntary Life. This week I'd like to share with you a very interesting article and some thoughts that I've had about it. It's an article by somebody who I admire very much, Harry Browne. Harry Browne was an investment advisor. That's how he made his money. And he was also the author of a book called How I Found Freedom in an Unfree World. And I've spoken about Harry Browne a few times on this podcast. In fact, the first podcast of all is about Harry Browne's book, How I Found Freedom in an Unfree World. I'll put a link to that in the show notes because I gave a bit of an introduction to Harry Browne in that episode and talked about his life history and who he was. So if you want to find out more about him, have a listen to that episode. I'll put a link in the show notes. Reading Harry Browne's work and hearing his radio shows was a really big influence on me. I learned how to invest through Harry Browne, through listening to his radio shows and reading his book, Fail-Safe Investing, which taught me all about the permanent portfolio and passive investing and many of the things that I now use in my own investing life. I never met him. In fact, he died over 10 years ago. I think it was 2003 or 4, sometime around then. But he was a big influence on me because he was an example of somebody who achieved financial independence and went off and lived a life of personal freedom. He lived in lots of different countries, he wrote books, and he's one of the people who I really look to in designing my own life and thinking about my own path. Harry Browne's book, How I Found Freedom in an Unfree World, was a big influence on me during the period when I was thinking about selling my business. I had other influences too, especially a mentor who I met when I was a teenager who built his own business and who I learned from, whose name was Peter, and I wrote about him in my book, Job Free. But Harry was another person who I really looked up to, and so I read lots and lots of things that he wrote, and one of the things was this article, which I came across years and years ago. And just before we get into the article, I do want to say I have enormous respect for Harry Browne, but I do think he had blind spots. And that's one of the most interesting things about this article for me, is that I think it really shows up an important and interesting blind spot, as well as providing some very interesting ideas. This is an article that Harry Browne wrote many years ago in the 1960s, and I read this article probably 10 years ago, if not more. And it was one of those pieces of writing that I read at the time, and I found it very interesting, and I thought about it, and I found myself thinking about it again recently. Because this article is called A Gift to My Daughter. Harry Browne wrote this to his daughter, and I'm now a father, and I have a daughter too, and I remembered this article, and I remembered what was in it, and it got me thinking about it. I found this happening quite a lot recently. There are all these ideas about parenting that I read many years ago, long before I became a parent, and now that I'm a parent, I'm remembering a lot of them, and they're coming to my mind. I'm thinking about them because I am now a parent. I do have a daughter, and so now I'm thinking about these ideas a lot. Recently, I did a book review of a book called Escape from Childhood. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. And that was also another book about parenting that I read years ago and then have been thinking about again. And this article by Harry Browne is very thought-provoking. Even if you're not thinking at all about parenting, the ideas in this article are very thought-provoking. And rather than reading it out for you, I've actually found a recording of Harry Browne reading out this article himself, and he says a little bit about the background to this article, and then he reads it. So as a special treat, we're actually going to hear from Harry. So let's listen to what he has to say, and then I'll share some thoughts about it afterwards. Here's Harry Browne.
In 1966, I was divorced from my first wife, and she had custody of our daughter, who was 9 years old at the time. And I was writing a syndicated newspaper column that went out to daily and weekly newspapers around the country. And one of the papers that carried it happened to be in the town where my ex-wife and my daughter lived. And it just so happened that my weekly column that particular week fell on Christmas Day of 1966. So I sent a Christmas card to my daughter and said, "Your Christmas present will be on the editorial page of the Santa Ana Register on Christmas morning." And so on Christmas morning, she opened the Santa Ana Register, went to the editorial page, and there was her Christmas present. I entitled it A Gift for my daughter, and I would like to read it to you now. It's Christmas, and I have the usual problem of deciding what to give you. I know you might enjoy many things, books, games, clothes, but I'm very selfish. I want to give you something that will stay with you for more than just a few months or a few years. I want to give you a gift that might remind you of me every Christmas. If I could give you just one thing, I'd want it to be a simple truth that took me many years to learn. If you learn it now, it may enrich your life in hundreds of ways, and it may save your having to face many problems that have hurt people who have never learned this simple truth. The truth is simply this: no one owes you anything. Now, how could such a simple statement be important? It may not seem so, but understanding it can bless your entire life. No one owes you anything. It means that no one else is living for you, my child, because no one is you. Each person is living for himself. His own happiness is all he can ever personally feel. When you realize that no one owes you happiness or anything else, you'll be freed from expecting what isn't likely to be. It means no one has to love you. If someone does love you, it's because there's something special about you that gives that person happiness. Find out what that something special is and try to make it stronger in you so that you'll be loved even more. When people do things for you, it's because they want to do these things, because you in some way give them something meaningful that makes them want to please you, not because anybody owes you anything. No one has to like you. If your friends want to be with you, it's not out of duty. Find out what makes others happy so that they'll want to be near you. No one has to respect you. Some people may even be unkind to you. But once you realize that people don't have to be good to you and may not be good to you, you'll learn to avoid those who would harm you, for you don't owe them anything either. No one owes you anything. You owe it to yourself to be the best person possible, because if you are, others will want to be with you, want to provide you with the things you want in exchange for what you're giving to them. Some people will choose not to be with you for reasons that have nothing to do with you. When that happens, look elsewhere for the relationships you want. Don't make someone else's problem your problem. Once you learn that you must earn the love and respect of others, you'll never expect the impossible, and you won't be disappointed. Others don't have to share their property with you, nor their feelings, nor their thoughts. If they do, it's because you've earned these things, and you have every reason to be proud of the love you receive, your friends' respect, the property you've earned. But don't ever take them for granted. If you do, you could lose them. They're not yours by right. You must always earn them. A great burden was lifted from my shoulders the day I realized that no one owes me anything. For so long as I'd thought that there were things I was entitled to, I'd been wearing myself out, physically and emotionally, trying to collect them. No one owes me moral conduct. No one owes me respect. No one owes me friendship. No one owes me love. No one owes me courtesy or intelligence. And once I recognized that, all my relationships became far more satisfying. I focused on being with people who want to do the things I want them to do. That understanding has served me well with friends, business associates, lovers, sales prospects, and even strangers. It constantly reminds me that I can get what I want only if I can enter the other person's world. I must try to understand how he thinks, what he believes to be important, what he wants. Only then can I appeal to someone in ways that will bring me what I want. And only then can I tell whether I really want to be involved with someone. and I can save the important relationships for those with whom I have the most in common. It's not easy to sum up in a few words what has taken me so many years to learn. But maybe if you reread this gift each Christmas, the meaning will become a little clearer every year. I hope so, for I want more than anything else for you to understand this simple truth that can set you free. No one owes you anything.
So that was Harry's article, read by himself. I just want to say, isn't it a pleasure to listen to somebody whose ideas are very clear? And that's the way that Harry Browne wrote. There's no pretentious language. It's just really clear. You know what he thinks, and he's conveying his ideas really clearly. That, to me, is the sign of a good thinker, somebody who's able to convey their ideas simply without pretentiousness. And in terms of the message of this article, I do really appreciate the overall idea that Harry Browne is talking about, the idea that nobody owes you anything. And it's clear that what he was trying to really emphasize is that life is about finding win-win relationships with other people. He's making the point that there's no benefit to relying on people owing you stuff out of a sense of guilt or anything else. He wants his daughters to know that it's far better to find positive ways to incentivize people to give you what you want so that you can have a win-win relationship with people. And I know that this informed Harry Browne's whole outlook on life. It's something that he wrote about a lot in his book, How I Found Freedom in an Unfree World. In that book, he talks a lot about ways to find win-win solutions for difficult business problems and relationship problems. And although he doesn't go into it in this article, underlying this idea that people don't owe you anything is the big idea that there are no unchosen positive obligations. In fact, it's a part of being free to recognize that nobody owes you anything and you don't owe anyone else anything unless you actually make a deal and agree to some kind of debt or obligation of some kind. But there are no unchosen positive obligations. But I think the point that Harry Browne really wanted to emphasize to his daughter is that as a practical matter, you can't rely on people feeling obliged to you. And so you should use incentives and find positive win-win outcomes in all your relationships, because as a practical matter, that's just going to give you a better life. I think that was a real argument that he was trying to convey in this article. And in general, I think that's a really important insight, and I agree it's really important to find win-win solutions and not to rely on people's sense of guilt about owing you something, and to work on the basis that nobody owes you love or attention or interest or respect or anything else. You have to earn these things in a positive win-win way with other people. So I think that's all great. But I do think that this is a strange article in a way, because I think it shows up one of Harry Browne's blind spots. And that's what I want to talk about now, is this other aspect of this article. This is a very interesting article because it's something that he wrote for his daughter. And that brings up a lot of thoughts for me about the particular content of the article. When it comes to consenting adults who have no other relationships with each other and no other previous history, it's true that nobody owes you anything. You know, if you are romantically interested in someone, they don't owe you romantic interest back. If you want to do business with someone, they don't owe it to you to do business with you. If you want people to read your work, they don't owe you their attention. So when we're talking about adults who've never met and don't have anything to do with each other, yes, absolutely, nobody owes you anything. But people can owe each other things. And that's a really important aspect of life, is that you can have positive obligations to other people, especially if you choose to have positive obligations to other people. I mean, if you borrow money from somebody, then you do owe them money. And if someone borrows money from you, then rightfully, they do owe you money. And if that person said to you, hey, nobody owes you anything, that would be kind of annoying, because I think you'd be justified to say, hey, you borrowed $500 from me and I want it back. You do owe me. I appreciate that Harry Browne's idea in this article is to emphasize that there's no way of forcing other people to feel like they owe you stuff. But the point I'm making here is that although there are no unchosen positive obligations, there are chosen positive obligations. It is possible for people to owe each other stuff if they do something to incur a debt or an obligation through their own actions. And interestingly, the most important one of all, I think, is the obligations that come to a parent from having kids. That's the most important chosen obligation that you can have in life. And to explain what I mean, I'm going to give you an analogy. Imagine that you're on a boat at sea in the middle of the ocean. You're on a big boat, looking out at sea, standing on deck with a friend of yours, and imagine that this friend is looking at something in the water, leaning over the side of the boat, and imagine if you just give him a little push, and it's just enough to knock this guy over into the water, and you're now on the boat, and your friend is in the water. Now, if your friend were to yell up help, I'm sure you agree with me that it wouldn't be okay for you to yell back down to your friend, hey, I just want to let you know that nobody owes you anything in this life, and then to just sail off. Obviously not. If you push your friend into the ocean, then it's on you to save them, to get them out of the water, throw in a life jacket, launch a dinghy, throw down a rope, jump in yourself, do whatever you have to do to save this person from their fate in the middle of the ocean, which is going to be to drown. And if they do drown, it's going to be on you because you pushed them in. We all understand intuitively that if you push someone off your boat into the ocean, then through your action, you have put that person in danger. And it's on you to save that person, to get them out of danger. And if you don't save them and they drown, then that's murder. So there are circumstances where this whole nobody owes you anything idea don't make sense. And that is just a really obvious, clear example of one of them. And the point is, there are circumstances where you can owe somebody something, even if you've never made a contract or a deal or something like written stuff down. The example of you and your friend on the boat is an example where there was no contract about who's going to save who from the ocean. But the fact is, by pushing your friend in, you have put them in danger, and it's your fault, and you have to fix it because you're the cause of your friend being in the water and being in danger. And so you are responsible for that person's safety now that you've thrown them in the water. And the same logic applies to parenting. When you have a child, you're bringing someone into a situation of helplessness. When you have a child, you're creating a new life, and that child is totally helpless, and they didn't ask to be put in that position. You put them there as the parents. So it's your responsibility to get them out of that situation of danger. And what that means with children is that, you have to look after your children and give them everything they need to become a fully independent, healthy adult with all of the faculties that they need to survive in the world and get on and live their own life. And that responsibility comes because you're the one who put them in that situation. Parents do owe their children a huge amount. And that's why it bothers me that Harry wrote this to his daughter, because he was her father. And the backstory to this, he talked a little bit about in the clip that I played to you. The backstory to him writing this letter is that he went through a very acrimonious divorce with his first wife, and he lost custody of his daughter. He wasn't allowed to see her. He didn't have visitation, as far as I understand. So that was a really tough situation, and not a good situation for kids to be in. An acrimonious divorce, any divorce at all, is not a good situation. I'm saying that as the child of parents who split up when I was very young, and my parents were never even married. They split up when I was very young, and I can tell you it absolutely sucked. Unless there's some kind of violence or physical danger, no child wants their parents to break up their family. A divorce utterly sucks from the kid's perspective. And not only does it just suck, but it can have very bad effects on the mental health of children. Statistically, parents divorcing is a risk factor for a whole range of destructive and self-destructive behaviors in children of divorced parents as they grow up. I'm talking about depression, drug abuse, self-harm. There are a range of factors that can lead to these kinds of destructive behaviors, things like the death of a parent or whether the parents use drugs and so forth. And statistically, divorce is one of those factors. It's actually really bad for the kids. Now, that doesn't mean that it's necessarily going to lead to certain things. It's complicated. We're talking about a statistical correlation. I myself come from parents who broke up when I was very young. So it's not like you're fated to a particular kind of outcome, but It's not good. And the point I want to make is that I think this was a blind spot for Harry. When he told his daughter that nobody owes you anything, I think he had a blind spot about himself and his role as a parent, because parents owe their children a huge amount. And Harry's situation as a parent with an acrimonious divorce, it certainly wasn't ideal. And I don't know the details, but the bare facts are that it was pretty problematic. I mean, he stopped seeing his daughter for years and being there to look after her and be a positive role model to her. And you've got to bear in mind also that from the child's perspective, if a parent is willing to give up custody to get a divorce, as Harry did, then what that says is, I can't stand this person, his ex-wife. I can't stand this person so much. I'm willing to just give up seeing you in order to get away from her. And not only that, I'm going to leave you with her. That's a pretty tough message for the kid. And if you think about it in those terms, if I was his daughter and I then received a message from him to say, I just want to let you know, nobody owes you anything, I'd be kind of angry. I think my response would be, well, okay, then fuck you, Dad. That's what I would think if I was Harry's daughter and I received that letter. I think this is important because my podcast is all about personal freedom. I'm really into personal freedom, and I still have a huge amount of respect for Harry, but I do think that sometimes people can have some blind spots about these kinds of things. For example, when it comes to us now having a daughter, I've noticed people say things to me like, yeah, just because you have a child, it doesn't have to stop you doing what you want to do in life and go for it with your traveling and so forth. And, I actually think that having a daughter does mean that I can't just do whatever I want in life. We're going to have to be really careful about looking at what is good for our daughter. And I would like to travel more and continue our life of permanent travel, especially during her early childhood, because I just think that can be a magical childhood. I lived abroad for a year as a young child. I lived in Italy with my parents when they were still together. And those are some of my fondest childhood memories. Some of my first childhood memories too come from living abroad. I think it can be a wonderful thing to do, but I'm just very aware that even if you believe in personal liberty and you believe in this general idea that nobody owes anybody else anything, that's true when it comes to consenting adults, making business relationships or dating or this kind of thing. Nobody owes you anything, absolutely. But it is possible for people to owe you something through their actions. And parents certainly owe their children a hell of a lot. So although I do appreciate on a general level Harry's message that nobody owes you anything, I think coming from a father to a daughter, and especially from a father who was unable to see his daughter because of an acrimonious divorce, I think that's a kind of a strange message. I tried to put myself into Harry's shoes and think about that situation, because it must have been a really tough situation, not being able to see his daughter and communicating with her through letters and in this case through a newspaper column. And I think about what would I say to my daughter under those circumstances if I wanted to say something to try and encapsulate an important message that I would think it would be very important for her to know, if I just really wanted her to know something. If I was Harry, I would say to my daughter, I just want you to know, as your father, that you don't owe me anything. You never asked to be born into our family, but we brought you into this world. I hope you will choose to spend time with me and share things with me about your life and your thoughts and your dreams and your hopes. But I just want you to know that you don't owe me anything. We gave you life, but you are free. Your life is your own. It's yours to do with as you see fit. And you don't owe us anything. And there's going to be lots of other people in life who try to convince you that you owe them something. People are going to try and convince you that you owe them something just because you were born in this country. And they're going to put all sorts of labels on you about being a citizen and taking part in all sorts of rituals to do with the nation and politics and so forth. And you'll have to navigate all those weird obligations that people try and put on you in your own way and decide what the best course of action for you is. But I just want you to know you don't owe those people anything either. You're an individual. You're born morally free of any obligations. And the only things that you owe are the obligations that you take on in your own life. I hope you found that interesting. I'd love to hear your thoughts and feedback. That's all for this week. I'll be back next week with another episode. In the meantime, I hope you have a great week.
Thank you for listening to The Voluntary Life. If you have feedback about the show, please email Jake at thevoluntarylife.com. If you enjoyed this program, please share the podcast with your friends or click the donate button on thevolauntarylife.com.